Okay, let's just cut right to it. We are moving way past the daily headlines today because what we're actually witnessing right now are the terrifying yet totally fascinating early stages of a massive systemic global transition. Look, if you glance at the news and feel like the world is literally spinning out of control, you're not crazy. You're not imagining things. But to really get it, we have to connect the dots between economics, wars, artificial intelligence, and political polarization because they are all converging into an entirely new global era.
Which brings us to the big question of this explainer. Are governments already losing control? Experts are deeply divided on exactly why this chaos is happening, basically splitting into two main camps. One side says, hey, this is driven by the rapid collapse of old world political power. But the other side? They insist that's old school thinking, and the real driver is the unstoppable acceleration of new world technology. So let's unpack both of these perspectives so we can figure out what on earth happens next.
Section 1. The G0 power vacuum.
All right, let's first look at this through the eyes of the geopolitical realists. They argue that the root of our current global instability is a massive power vacuum. For decades, we had a really clear global order, right? But now we're entering what political scientist Ian Bremmer calls a G0 world. Not a G7, not a G20, G0. The National Intelligence Council maps out this changing constellation of powerful actors. Sure, you've got major states like the US and China, but now you also have regional powers, massive tech corporations, and non-state actors all pulling in entirely different directions. Meanwhile, our international treaties and norms, they're lagging way behind. The old rules simply don't apply to the new players, and that disequilibrium is exactly what's causing all this uncertainty and conflict.
And here's the kicker. According to top risk analysis from the Eurasia Group, the biggest driver of this geopolitical uncertainty is actually the traditional architect of the global order itself. They literally state, the United States has become the biggest driver of geopolitical uncertainty in the world. As the U.S. steps back from its historical role as a sort of global policeman, shifting its stance on trade, borders, and collective security, it acts as this massive risk multiplier. Think about it like a building. When the foundational pillar shifts its weight, the entire structure trembles.
Section 2. Symptoms of a changing order. So when we look at the wars and tensions in Ukraine, the Middle East, or the South China Sea, we tend to treat them as these isolated crises. But the geopolitical perspective tells us they aren't isolated at all. They're direct symptoms of this larger power vacuum. Rivals and emerging alliances are basically just testing the boundaries of a world order that can no longer enforce its own rules. And this exposes a glaring vulnerability, short-term versus long-term thinking. The West is currently trapped in short-term political cycles, obsessing over the next election, sudden tariff shifts, immediate polling data. Meanwhile, China's executing this methodical, decades-long strategy. They aren't just reacting to the news, they're locking down global critical minerals, rare earths, and monopolizing the industrial tech and EV stacks. So who actually benefits from global instability? The players playing the long game, while everyone else is distracted by the next news cycle.
Section 3. Rise of the tech oligarchy.
Now, the technological accelerationists look at all of this and argue that obsessing over Washington or Beijing is totally outdated. The real superpower shift isn't happening in political capitals, it's happening in Silicon Valley. We are watching the rise of a tech oligarchy, where global influence and rulemaking shift from nation-states to tech elites. Think back to the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was Microsoft that detected the initial cyber strikes and alerted governments. It was private satellite internet, Starlink, that literally kept the Ukrainian military online. Private tech companies are increasingly dictating the geopolitical reality on the ground. Governments aren't just losing control to other governments, they're losing it to corporations. And this gets genuinely terrifying when we bring artificial intelligence into the mix. A recent risk warning from the AI company Anthropic revealed they had developed a model so capable of finding security vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure and banking software that they literally couldn't safely release it. It was deemed an immediate systemic risk to the global economy and our security. Guys, this isn't a sci-fi movie. This is happening right now. The power to potentially hack the global power grid is being developed in private corporate labs way faster than regulators can even hold a meeting.
And quietly, right in the background, the societal effects are already fundamentally reshaping the economy. Take this deeply unsettling reality. Right now, as we speak, human workers in some factories are being paid to wear cameras on their heads, recording their exact hand movements. Why? To feed real-world physical data directly to the AI robotics that will eventually automate and replace their jobs. We are witnessing humans actively training their own replacements, which is fueling deep economic stress and public anger before the technology has even fully arrived. Section 4. The AI Risk Multiplier.
So, what happens when we merge these two massive perspectives? This is the ultimate systemic intersection right here. A rapidly collapsing geopolitical order colliding with hyper-advanced, totally unregulated technology. We have to ask, what happens when AI merges with geopolitical conflict? What happens when incredibly powerful, autonomous cyber weapons and intelligence tools trickle down to state actors, rogue nations, or even non-state proxies? The barrier to entry for global disruption is dropping to basically zero. A localized skirmish could escalate overnight just because of an AI-driven cyber attack on a supply chain or financial hub. And while this tech threatens our external security, it is completely devastating our internal stability. The National Intelligence Council outlines exactly how algorithms are just completely overtaking actual expertise. We have this hyper-connected proliferation of competing truths, leading to massive, intense polarization. Populations are losing all trust in institutions, media, and leadership, exactly at the historical moment when governments need societal cohesion the most to navigate these huge crises.
Section 5. Cooperation or systemic collapse. Historically, when crises of this magnitude converge, economic stress, crazy new technologies, giant power vacuums, they usually force one of two outcomes: an entirely new system of global cooperation or total systemic collapse. Intelligence reports model this out into two distinct scenarios. The first is tragedy and mobilization. This is where a shared, catastrophic global threat actually forces a bottom-up social movement, transforming global cooperation and reshuffling the geopolitical hierarchy for the better. But the alternative? Separate silos. The world permanently fractures into walled-off, hostile economic blocks. Supply chains completely die, and localized conflicts surge as everyone retreats into their own heavily armed corners.
So, the crucial takeaway from this explainer is that you aren't just living through a really chaotic news cycle. You are living through the defining historical transition of the 21st century. Will the terrifying convergence of AI and geopolitical collapse force us to finally cooperate, or will it literally tear the global map apart into hostile silos? The rules of the world you grew up in, they're gone. The only question now is, what happens next?